Minister, Dame Harriett Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And this has been a genuinely important, interesting and lively debate on the subject of product regulation and metrology. Because it's also been a debate about the balance of power between the executive and us here in Parliament. The UK product safety and metrology framework is derived from European Union law, and it developed while the UK was a member of the European Union, when we didn't have the opportunity here to address product safety as rapidly as we do now in our changing world. And following our departure from the European Union, the UK established its independent regulatory system, which must be flexible enough to accommodate emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and address changes in consumer purchasing behaviours. As the explanatory notes of this bill state, the purpose of the bill is to ensure the UK is better equipped to tackle modern safety challenges, safeguard consumers, seize opportunities for economic growth, and so on. Now, the Secretary of State said earlier in his introductory remarks that this bill was introduced in the previous Parliament. And I want to emphasise that it was not. And I want to offer the Minister the chance to correct the record in his closing remarks in case the House has been inadvertently misled. However, upon leaving the European Union, the UK created the UK Conformity Assessed Marking, known as the UKCA, to replace the Conformité Européenne marking, also known as CE, the markings which manufacturers use to demonstrate product conformity. The UK still recognises CE markings. However, the EU does not recognise the UK conformity assessment. So can the Minister confirm that in his discussions and resetting of discussions in terms of trade with the European Union, that discussions are happening to ensure that UK CA markings and any products regulated here in the UK are mutually recognised? Turning to the points that have been raised in today's excellent debate, we heard fantastic speeches from my honourable friends, the member for Beaconsfield, the member for South Holland and the Deepings, the member for Broadland and Fakenham, and the member for Beverley and Holderness. And we also heard some very powerful voices from Northern Ireland, benches adjacent East Antrim and North Antrim, and also the expertise that the Honourable Member for Wokingham brings from his background in the toy industry. From the benches opposite, we heard impassioned speeches, often about product safety from the member from Worsley and Eccles, Bathgate and Linlithgow, the member for Walthamstow, who described us as sinners repenting, which I hasten to surmise, Madam Deputy Speaker, might mean that she is a repenter who is beginning to sin. And we heard from the Stoke-on-Trent Central member, who is passionate advocate for the ceramics from his constituency. And then, in an absolute masterclass, Madam Deputy Speaker, we had the pleasure of hearing from Parliament's first metrologist, the ancient history of metrology, in a very, very enjoyable speech, and speeches from the member for Birmingham Northfield and Bury St Edmunds. But before embarking on the reason why we are opposing this bill tonight, I would like to welcome the government's U-turn in the other place on its plans to rule over the size of the Great British Pint, or as the member for Erewash would describe it, the 0.568 to 6125 cubic decimetre. And although they were initially resistant, ministers eventually recognised that our Great British Pint should remain untouched. But I'm afraid that's all I can welcome about this piece of legislation, because we on this side of the House are deeply concerned with the government's overreach and excessive reliance on delegated powers within this bill. Henry VIII would be absolutely delighted by this piece of legislation. The benches opposite claim that this will simplify our regulatory framework, yet all we see is the undermining of our sovereignty and of the powers of Parliament. This 15-page bill would give the Secretary of State unchecked powers to amend product safety regulations, change the definition of an online marketplace, introduce new penalties, inspection powers and charges on businesses, driving up the already soaring costs of doing business in the UK. Or, as many of my honourable friends have mentioned in this debate, grant sweeping powers to the government to potentially make us a passive recipient of laws made in Brussels. And while international trade and cooperation is welcome, this is not what over 17 million people voted for in 2016 when we took back control. This is a betrayal of Brexit. This bill is not purely a technical bill. Part of its purpose is to allow dynamic environment of goods with the EU single market laws, giving the EU power to rule on standards for manufactured goods that we produce here in the United Kingdom. The EU Trojan horse bill could see us readopting a regulatory regime over which we have no influence, impact or sanction, leaving us as the rule takers and not the rule makers. It is fundamentally not good practice or good governance to deliver substantial changes through delegated legislation. And I'm going to quote here, Madam Deputy Speaker, "We must bear in mind that the use of delegated powers carries a risk of abuse by the executive, which is not something the opposition could ever support. Rather, it is our duty at this stage to check the powers of the executive and ensure that we are not giving them carte blanche to change the balance of power permanently in their favour." These are not my words, Madam Deputy Speaker. These are the words of the Secretary of State, the member for Stalybridge and Hyde. Tomorrow, we could see tariffs imposed on us by the United States. It is paramount that we secure a mutually beneficial UK-US trade deal as soon as possible. However, I cannot see how this bill, which drags us closer to the European Union, would give the United States any incentive to work with us. So, in closing, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I ask the Minister a few questions? Can he confirm what the limits will be on ministerial powers? And what oversight will Parliament have in respect to regulatory changes made under this bill? What consultation will occur on change with the real-world businesses that are affected by it? And will he confirm that no regulations made under the bill will prevent or impede UK businesses from trading internationally? Madam Deputy Speaker, the Product Regulation and Metrology Bill undermines Parliament and risks tying British businesses to EU red tape in which we have no say. We cannot allow these excessive powers to create further uncertainty among British businesses of all sizes who are already facing the soaring costs of doing business due to the Chancellor's tax grab. This bill is a parliamentary sovereignty sellout. We got Brexit done, let's keep it that way. This is a bill that gives away control, and that is why I call upon the House this evening to back our amendment to stop the bill.
I call the Minister.